the Cigar Store Indian episode was a little goofy to me. Um, it's one of the few times where um, one of the main characters was mistakenly labeled. Let's put it that way. I'm careful with how I phrase that because I don't want to come across wrong or anything. But Jerry basically in this episode, out of bad luck, well, he was inadvertently offending a woman that he was attracted to, um, with her being Native American. There was things that he said that he did that just he wasn't going out of his way to make it look like that he had something against people with different cultures, but it was coming across that way, and him trying to impress a certain woman, it just was flubbing. Um, but my a couple of positives about this episode. One was a story with George, with how it was basically an episode of yes, he's living with his parents and he was being treated like he was like a teenager, not allowed to have people over the house at his parents' house while they're out of town. So there was that goofy story and him trying to get cleaned up, and staying on the coffee table was freaking him out that he had to go get the table refurnished. And of course he ends up having a little bit of a fling with the lady who works at the antique shop. Elaine meets some weird guy on a subway who falls in love with her, and makes a bouquet out of a TV guide that Elaine had, which of course upsets Frank Costanza, as he apparently collects TV guides. But Kramer, though, I think Kramer first pitches the idea of a book idea that, of course, would go on to be a story for most of the rest of season 5. But there is some positives, some things that were funny, but a goofy episode that I definitely don't watch too often. But there will be things, of course, that I remember from it. So, the episode starts off with Jerry, Elaine, and George and Kramer at George's house with his parents. His parents are out of town. George is freaking out because he needs to make sure the place gets clean, because he doesn't want his parents to know that he had people over. He's acting like he's a teenager who was left home alone for a few days, and he wasn't allowed to have any wild parties over, even though George is a grown adult, not the most mature, but So I guess people were putting cups of coffee on the table, and it left some stains. So he freaked out and he wanted to get the coffee table refurnished. Elaine was upset though because Jerry had promised he would take her back to her place. She was having people over. She mentioned some friends' names that include this one girl, Winona, who Jerry kind of had a thing for, and she just recently broke up with her boyfriend, so she said, I'll put in a good word for you. But Elaine got upset because Jerry bailed on her to take George to the antique shop to get the coffee table refurnished. So then Kramer offers to go for a ride with Elaine and take the subway, and she said, "Well, I'll be bored on the subway." So then they give Elaine a TV guide, which Elaine reads while on the subway. While she's on the subway, they stop at this one stop where apparently they have $3 gyros cooked and ready, right off the subway. So Kramer's going to run off really quick, grab one, and get right back on. Unfortunately, though, it didn't work, as Kramer didn't get back in time, and his arm, stuck inside the door, wasn't able to keep it open, and he missed out. But this guy whose name was Ricky, walks by and sits down across from Elaine, and he was just looks like your boyfriend doesn't have much luck. And he's missing the train. He's like, oh, he's not my boyfriend. Oh, he's not? Interesting. I've never seen such a beautiful woman reading a TV guide from so far away. And he sits next to Elaine, and he's like trying to tell her, give her like the best shows to watch, which a lot of them was like I Love Lucy, the Lucy Show, and this one. He was, again, obviously a creepy guy, and he was freaking Elaine out. So Elaine gets off at her stop, but she leaves the TV guide on the subway. But then the guy sees Frank Costanza's address on the TV guide, which has Al Roker on it. So, literally, this guy has a weird idea that we'll get back to in a bit. Meanwhile, while Jerry's at the antique shop, he mentions something about how maybe he should get Elaine a gift as like an apology gift to make up for bailing on her. And basically, he goes with the Cigar Store Indian. He takes it to Elaine's, where again Winona is, and of course Jerry wants to impress her because he has a thing for her, and he knows that she's single again. Opens it up, and he starts doing some goofy stuff with it. And Winona was getting offended, and she walks away. And then, of course, Jerry wouldn't stop acting goofy until he notices Winona's gone. And as when it's revealed, they tell him that Winona is Native American, and what he did was offending her. And Jerry felt horrible, and he wanted to go, give an apology. Now, also, I forgot to mention, but at the beginning of the episode, also, whenever they're getting ready to take the coffee table get refurnished, Kramer mentions the idea about, for the first time, of a coffee table book about coffee tables. And he was telling Elaine about it on the subway, and Elaine pretended she was listening to him, but he really wasn't. And then of course, eventually, there was some business moves that we'll talk about in a second that leads to the start of the idea being published. Again, the coffee table about coffee tables, like a legitimate book that we turned into a mini coffee table, and it was all about coffee tables. So of course Jerry offends Winona. Elaine does not want the Indian, of course, so Kramer takes it, but Jerry didn't know that at the time. George, though, meanwhile, took the lady whose name was Sylvia from the antique shop back to his parents' house. She thinks George is some successful guy who lives in like a crappy neighborhood and has his own house. And they end up fooling around in his parents' bedroom. But of course, at the time, you think that, it was in his parents' bed. Well, we didn't know till in a future episode that apparently George's parents sleep in separate beds. So, they fool around one of the beds or not? Because then when his parents come home, Estelle finds a wrapper in her bed, which upsets her. Frank Costanza is upset because his TV guide, the one TV, Elaine took the TV guide, and apparently he collects TV guides, so he was upset about that. And then, of course, George had gotten the table refurnished. Of course, he didn't know, but they're telling George that he's grounded. And he's like, but I'm a grown man. He's like, you were under our house. It's our rules. You broke them. You're grounded. And in the midst of all this, Ricky, the creepy guy from the subway, shows up. And he literally had made Elaine a bouquet of TV episodes from that TV guide, which upset Frank Costanza even more because, again, he collects the TV guides. And of course, but then Jerry then goes over to Winona's and apologizes, and she mentions how it's this very sensitive thing to her. And then he offers to take her out for some Chinese. Well, he asked this mailman if he knew where the Chinese restaurant was. The mail guy was Chinese, and he took it as Jerry, which he didn't mean to, but obviously, the guy got offended. He took it offense that Jerry said, oh, you think it's because I'm Chinese? That means that you don't know where the Chinese restaurant was? And then, so the guy's flipping out, and Winona's getting uncomfortable again. And then there's Kramer going down the street in the taxi with a Cigar Store Indian that he had taken from Elaine, and he starts doing weird stuff, and then that just upsets Winona even more. She goes upstairs to the apartment and cancels the night. So, again, obviously, again, of course, Elaine then finds out that Frank Costanza was upset about her taking the TV guide that Winona had. Well, Jerry and Winona made up. She had an extra one, so Jerry gave Elaine that one, and she was taking it back to Frank Costanza to give to him. Unfortunately, though, on the way over, she got greedy, and when they got to the spot for the gyros, she went to go get a gyro, but didn't make it back in time. But when she did, as she was eating the gyro, the juices were dripping onto the cover. When she got to the Costanzas, first off, Frank Costanza was upset with her, but he brought her the TV guide. But then, of course, she's freaked out because Ricky was there with that bouquet, and then Frank's even more upset then because the TV guide had stains on it. And then Ricky accidentally knocks over the coffee table and spills, I think, stuff on the table, and he also, I think, spilled Frank's rest of his TV guide collections. So Estelle had to go take the table back to the antique shop, the same place that George took it to earlier, and get it refurnished. And that's when Elaine finds out that George is basically a fraud and lied that he doesn't work, he's a bum, and he lives with his mom and his daddy. So obviously it's a turnoff for her. Meanwhile, Jerry and Winona were about to go out on another date. But then they get into a fight because Winona needed that TV guide back. But then Jerry was trying to stop himself from saying some things that would definitely offend her. But Winona knew what he meant, and she got upset and left. And then the episode ended with Jerry and Elaine were on the subway. I forgot where they were going. But Jerry got off for a gyro. He didn't make it in time. It was exactly kind of like what happened with Kramer early in the episode. And then some guy takes a gyro, I think it was, and he sits down across from Elaine and basically starts the same conversation she had with Ricky. Except this time Elaine realizes the guy she's talking to is, in fact, who's on the front of the TV guide, Al Roker. Which, the only time I forgot that Al Roker was on the episode of Seinfeld, but the only time I remember hearing about Al Roker before was that when he was like a special guest ring announcer for a match at WrestleMania 33 with John Cena and Nikki Bella versus The Miz and Maurice. But that's Cigar Store Indian. Not really one of my favorite episodes. I mean, again, I like, how things I like in the story about George basically being treated like a teenager, how he has to clean up because he had a party while he had people over while his parents were away. The stuff though with Ricky was goofy, which is just, we see Ricky again in a later episode and on the next disc actually, who is just weirdly obsessed with Elaine and of course humming the I Love Lucy stuff. And then, but of course, the story with Jerry and Winona. I mean, Winona was a beautiful woman, don't get me wrong, but it definitely was a tough one because, like I said, it's this weird story that I'm pretty sure it would be tough to tell today with, Jerry seemingly to accidentally offending certain cultures. Like, it was a goofy episode and definitely not one of my favorites, but again, at least we had that. We had the stuff with George and being treated like he was a teenager. But we also had the stuff with oh, I forgot. I completely forgot. I forgot to mention this part. Kramer tried to sell the Cigar Store Indian to a cigar store, but they wouldn't take it. But he ran into Lippman, and then he sold Lippman the Cigar Store Indian, and Lippman was for his idea about book about coffee tables, which he basically confronted Elaine and said you should be thinking about stuff like this more often. And I think Elaine was going to be editing it or proofreading it or whatnot, even though she wasn't a big supporter of the coffee table about coffee tables. But other than that stuff, I'm just like, not really an episode I'd go out of the way to watch. But that's the Cigar Store Indian episode. The next few episodes we do, there's definitely a couple good ones on disc 3 of season 5. One of them is another one of my top personal favorites, the dinner party episode. And of course, in the previous episode, we had talked about Jerry mentioning his vomit streak. That gets brought up in that episode. I think that's still a couple episodes away, but there is a couple good episodes on disc 3 that I'm looking forward to talking about. We get, I think disc 4 it is, I think it is, we have another one of my top favorites. So a lot of good ones are coming up for sure. But guys, again, that's my review on the Cigar Store Indian episode. Not really one of my favorite episodes of Seinfeld, but it is what it is. What were your thoughts on the Cigar Store Indian episode? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And be sure as always to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter at DemandAir93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch y'all later. Have a great rest of your night. And peace out, everybody.